Welcome to another episode of The Deep Dive. In this episode, we uncover the understanding of your enemy, Satan's origin, his strategies, and how to defeat him. This is your complete guide to spiritual warfare, because the greatest trick isn't that he exists, it's that you don't know how he operates. Let's dive in.
Usually when we talk about a medical diagnosis, there is a tremendous comfort in the expectation of precision.
Right. It feels like engineering.
Yeah, exactly. You break your arm, the x-ray shows this jagged white line on the screen, and the doctor just points a pen at it and says, there it is. That's the problem.
That's very black and white.
Right. But when you step out of the physical body and into the world of human psychology or temptation and the darker, more chaotic parts of our own minds, suddenly that x-ray machine is just broken.
Oh, completely.
We are looking at a landscape that is incredibly murky. It's a place where the lines between our own anxieties, our bad habits, and, external pressures completely blur.
It is the absolute definition of diving into the deep end of the human experience. And according to our source material today, the superhuman experience as well.
Yes, which is what we're looking into today. We are exploring a fascinating text called The Adversary, a guide to spiritual warfare and victory.
It's a very intense read.
It really is. So our mission for you today is to unpack this text's highly comprehensive, step-by-step breakdown of a cosmic enemy. We're going to look at how this source claims this enemy operates in the very mundane shadows of your everyday life.
And maybe most importantly, we are going to walk through the specific tactical battle plan the text lays out for defense.
Right. But before we get into the weeds of those tactics, we need to set some clear ground rules for how we are approaching this material today.
Yeah, that's crucial, because whether you're coming to this deep dive from a deeply theological background or, you're listening purely out of intellectual curiosity, what this text offers is a highly systematized look at human vulnerability.
And psychological manipulation, right?
Exactly. And spiritual resilience. It presents a very specific, intense worldview that is deeply rooted in ancient biblical literature.
Right. So we are going to be exploring these concepts exactly as the source material presents them. We're acting as impartial guides to this worldview.
Yeah, we aren't here to preach it.
No, not at all. But we are here to understand the intricate mechanics of how the text claims this unseen world operates.
Absolutely.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because before we can understand the tactics of any warfare, we have to understand exactly who the text says we're fighting.
And the source doesn't start where you might expect.
No, it really doesn't. It doesn't open with, like, a cartoon villain in a red suit holding a pitchfork in a fiery cave.
Right, the classic caricature. Instead, it starts in a place of absolute pristine perfection.
Which is wild to think about.
It is. The text points heavily to the book of Ezekiel, specifically chapter 28, and it describes the origin of this entity not as a monster, but as a flawless, incredibly wise being called a guardian cherub.
A guardian cherub. So in this theological framework, this was an angel who stood in the very presence of the divine, holding this exalted position of authority and beauty.
Yes, the text is very clear on how high-ranking he was.
Right. Then the text shifts over to Isaiah 14 and outlines what it calls the 5 I will statements.
Oh, this part is fascinating.
Yeah, it details this internal monologue where this being says, I will ascend to heaven. I will raise my throne above the stars of God. I will make myself like the Most High.
It's pure hubris.
Exactly.
Yeah.
When I was reading this section, the analogy that immediately came to mind was a hostile corporate takeover.
Oh, that's a good way to look at it.
It reads like a trusted C-suite executive, right? Someone who has the ear of the CEO, becoming fueled by extreme narcissism and just secretly plotting to oust the founder of the company.
Yeah, an inside job.
But looking at how catastrophic the fallout is, I have to ask how the text interprets the motive here.
Yeah.
I mean, does the guide view this as a tragic miscalculation?
Like an accident.
Yeah, like this being just got swept up in his own hype and made a terrible mistake.
Well, what's fascinating here is that the text is adamant that this was absolutely not a mistake.
Really?
Yeah. It defines this as a deliberate, conscious, and unprovoked rebellion. This wasn't a momentary lapse in judgment or, an accident born out of ignorance. It was a calculated coup initiated by a being who possessed immense wisdom. And because of that deliberate choice, the text builds a very detailed psychological profile of this adversary.
Right. And the first trait it lists is murderous hatred, which it ties directly to the creation of humanity.
Exactly. The source claims this entity hates humanity specifically because humans are said to bear the image of God.
Wow. So it's very personal.
Deeply personal. It creates a profound cosmic envy. Since the adversary cannot strike directly at the creator he rebelled against, he targets the image bearers.
Goes after the kids, basically.
Yeah, that's exactly it. The text also highlights a trait it calls cowardly opportunism. This enemy does not fight fair.
No honorable duels here.
Not at all. He avoids direct confrontation with strength and instead attacks the vulnerable, the isolated, and the exhausted. But perhaps the most chilling psychological trait the guide lays out is his eternal rigidity.
Okay, I want to make sure I understand the mechanics of that rigidity.
Yeah.
Because the text makes a sharp distinction between human failings and this angelic rebellion.
Right. The distinction lies in the concept of redemption. Unlike humans, who the text says are offered grace because they are born into a broken world.
Because we don't have all the facts.
Exactly. Fallen angels have no redemption plan. This entity's rebellion happened in the full, unveiled presence of divine glory. He had perfect knowledge.
Oh, I see. So there's no ignorance to excuse it.
Right. Because he rejected that perfect knowledge, his personality is now completely fixed. He is entirely unrepentant and incapable of godly sorrow.
That's terrifying.
He really is. All he has left is this impotent fury and a desire to cause collateral damage.
That fixed state completely recontextualizes the names and titles the Bible gives him, which the text takes the time to break down.
Names are very revealing.
Yeah, like the word Satan isn't a first name. It literally translates to adversary or the accuser.
Yeah.
His entire identity has become opposition.
Right.
The word devil means slanderer, someone who spreads malicious lies to ruin a reputation. Even the name Lucifer, which translates to light bearer, is treated in the text as a tragic, ironic reminder of the glorious light that was permanently corrupted.
He is entirely defined by who he is fighting against.
Exactly.
He's become a dark mirror image of divine attributes, twisted into corruption. In his hands, authority devolves into tyranny, and justice is warped into vindictive, relentless accusation.
So, if that is who the player is, this brilliant, ancient, highly strategic chess master, we need to look at exactly how he moves his pieces on the board.
The tactical side.
Right. The text lays out what it calls the three-pronged assault, drawing a formula from the book of 1 John chapter 2.
And it argues that every temptation basically falls into one of three categories, right?
Yes, the lust of the flesh, the lust of the eyes, and the boastful pride of life.
When you look at the mechanics of that three-pronged assault, it is terrifyingly logical.
Break that down for us.
Well, the lust of the flesh is designed to bypass a person's spiritual defenses entirely by attacking legitimate physical needs and twisting them out of proportion.
So taking something good and ruining it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It takes the natural human need for rest and twists it into crippling sloth. It takes the need for security and warps it into hoarding or greed.
Right.
Then the lust of the eyes operates differently. That tactic is entirely about manufacturing discontent.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it is the strategy of dazzling a person with what they don't have, forcing them to constantly compare their reality to an impossible ideal.
Which feels incredibly relevant when you think about modern social media. Just that constant bombardment of curated, perfect lives
Yeah,
that makes you resent your own.
absolutely.
And then the third prong, the pride of life, is that quiet internal whisper saying, you don't need anyone else. You will be like God. You are your own ultimate authority.
Independence as a weapon.
Yeah. But I want to pause on this because the text goes even deeper into what it calls the siege of the mind. It lists three specific mental tactics: accusation, intimidation, and rationalization.
A very familiar trio.
Right. Accusing you of past mistakes, intimidating you with fear of failure, and rationalizing small compromises by whispering, just this once, it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
Now, I have to push back hard on this framework. The text has spent all this time setting up this massive cosmic being who used to be a guardian cherub, but this list of tactics,
Yeah.
this just sounds like standard human psychology. It sounds like my everyday anxiety when I'm stressed about a work email or the mental gymnastics I do to justify skipping the gym.
Right. The mundane stuff.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I'm having trouble bridging the gap here. Is the guide seriously arguing that every single bad thought or every moment of elevated heart rate over a deadline is a direct, targeted spiritual attack?
That is precisely the tension the text attempts to resolve. It is careful not to say that every anxious thought is a demon whispering in your ear.
Okay, good.
Yeah, or that you aren't responsible for your own bad habits. What the text portrays is an enemy who is a master of opportunistic timing and cunning, calculated patience.
So he's not necessarily making the anxiety happen out of thin air.
Right. He understands human psychology, physiological weakness, and generational trauma far better than we do.
So the argument is that he doesn't necessarily create the initial stress, but he monitors it and weaponizes it when it reaches a tipping point.
Yes. The text argues he waits for moments of natural exhaustion or grief. It points to the biblical narrative of Jesus fasting in the desert for 40 days.
Right, a famous example.
The temptation didn't happen on day 1. It happened on day 40, when physical depletion was at its absolute peak.
Oh, that makes sense.
The text also uses the example of King David. David was supposed to be at war with his army, but he stayed home in his palace. He was idle, restless, and wandering on his roof when he saw Bathsheba.
Right.
The enemy didn't force David to stay home, but he exploited that self-created idleness. And regarding your point about rationalization, the text argues this entity rarely rushes people into massive, life-ruining decisions overnight.
It's more insidious than that.
Very. He operates by moving the moral goalposts inch by inch over decades. He desensitizes a person to the point where, eventually, a catastrophic compromise no longer even looks like a sin.
It's a slow boil.
Exactly.
But for a slow boil to work over decades, the person in the pot can't know the water is getting hotter. How does the text say an enemy like that operates so openly without being detected by the person he's manipulating?
Well, the guide warns that he disguises himself as an angel of light.
An angel of light.
Yeah. He doesn't peddle obvious evil. He peddles a counterfeit kingdom. He offers versions of reality that look incredibly appealing but are structurally hollow.
The text is super specific about what those counterfeits look like, too.
Mm-hmm.
It argues he offers prosperity without the need for character-building suffering, or a highly emotional spirituality that completely ignores any difficult teachings in Scripture.
The most effective counterfeit he creates, however, is isolation disguised as independence.
That's a huge distinction.
It really is. The text claims he works tirelessly to separate believers from their community, telling them they don't need anyone else. When a person is isolated, their perspective inevitably warps.
And any system of accountability just vanishes.
Exactly. Deception requires a vacuum to thrive.
If his primary tactic is creating that vacuum of isolation on a global scale, that implies he has an army helping him build those walls.
Oh, he does.
The text makes it clear this entity doesn't work alone. The source points to Revelation 12, noting that when this guardian cherub fell, a third of the angelic host fell with him and became what we refer to as demons.
And the guide attributes a massive scope of real-world influence to these foot soldiers. It argues their work manifests as systemic corruption.
Like on a global scale.
Yes. The text points to corrupt governments, economies built entirely on human exploitation, and relentless historical brutality like human trafficking and genocides as the literal orchestrated works of this demonic army meant to steal, kill, and destroy.
It's a heavy concept.
Very heavy. They also actively work to create a localized spiritual blindness in everyday society, keeping humanity distracted from any eternal realities.
I am still wrestling with how the text attributes both systemic government corruption and a person's individual spiritual blindness to the same organized hierarchy.
It gets a massive scale.
It really is. But setting the scale aside, the text points out an incredible paradox about the belief system of these entities. It quotes James 2.19, which says, "Even the demons believe and shudder."
If we connect this to the bigger picture, that single verse is profoundly revealing about the nature of faith within this theological framework.
How so?
Well, the Greek word used in that verse for shudder is phrazuzen. It does not mean a mild tremble of respect or a slight nervousness. It describes a bristling, horrific terror. It is the physical reaction of your hair standing on end in absolute paralyzing dread.
Which implies they aren't shuddering at an unknown variable. They are shuddering because they know exactly who the creator is.
Exactly. Demons are not atheists.
Yeah.
They possess a perfect, undeniable knowledge of the divine's existence because they used to stand in that very presence.
Right.
But their faith is merely an intellectual assent. It is a factual acknowledgement of reality that contains zero trust, zero love, and zero obedience.
Wow.
They shudder because they are fully aware they are enemies of an all-powerful creator, and they know their ultimate destruction is a fixed, unalterable certainty.
That stark distinction between knowing a fact and having a genuine relationship is a major theme here. The text illustrates this by bringing up a wild story from the book of Acts, chapter 19, about the 7 sons of Sceva.
Oh, it's a wild narrative.
It is. These were individuals trying to use the name of Jesus to cast out a demon, treating the name like an incantation or a magic spell.
And the text notes that the demon responds to them by essentially saying, I recognize Jesus and I know about Paul, but who are you?
And then it just beats him up.
Yeah, the possessed man physically overpowers all 7 of them.
I was trying to conceptualize how that dynamic works.
Yeah.
It feels exactly like trying to name drop the CEO of a company to a bouncer to get into a highly restricted VIP club when you don't even work at the company.
That's a great analogy.
The bouncer knows the CEO.
Yeah.
The bouncer respects the CEO's authority. But the bouncer also knows that you have absolutely no actual relationship with that CEO, which means you carry no delegated authority.
Right.
The name itself isn't a magic charm you can just wield.
Exactly. The relational authority behind the name is the only thing the entity recognizes. The power to resist this kind of evil, according to the text, does not come from chanting a specific vocabulary word. It flows exclusively from a lived, genuine relationship with the one who actually holds the authority.
So understanding the psychology of the enemy, the strategy of the long game, and the terror of these foot soldiers naturally brings us to the ultimate question for you, the listener. How does the text say you actually mount a defense against an unseen spirit?
Because the guide is clear that sheer mental willpower isn't enough.
Right, because willpower is a physical and psychological resource, and the enemy operates in a spiritual dimension. So the text provides a highly specific, tactical defense manual. Weapon number 1 is weaponizing the spoken word.
The guide refers to this as the "it is written" strategy, modeling it after how Jesus responded to temptation in the desert.
The text makes a fascinating claim about the limitations of the adversary here. It argues that the devil is not omniscient. He cannot casually read your mind or hear your silent internal thoughts.
But he absolutely hears your words.
Yes. Therefore, verbal declarative warfare, like actually speaking truths out loud into the room, is presented as essential to breaking a cycle of intimidation.
Speaking truth out loud physically moves the battle from the realm of internal, spiraling anxiety into a space of external, objective authority. It forces the chaotic thoughts into a structured reality.
That leads directly to weapon 2, which is putting on the full armor of God from Ephesians 6. The text treats this list, the belt of truth, the breastplate of righteousness, the shield of faith, the helmet of salvation, as a highly practical daily ritual.
It's very systematic.
It is. Reading this section, it felt exactly like a worker putting on their PPE, personal protective equipment, before walking onto a hazardous construction site.
Just the perfect way to look at it.
You would never walk onto a site with falling debris and live electrical wires without a hard hat and steel-toed boots. The text is arguing that walking into your daily life without putting on your spiritual PPE is just as reckless.
Let's break down the mechanics of that PPE, because the text uses very deliberate metaphors. Take the breastplate of righteousness. In a Roman soldier's armor, the breastplate protects the vital organs, specifically the heart and the lungs. In the biblical framework, the heart is considered the seat of your emotions, your desires, and your deepest affections. The text argues that righteousness, living in right standing with God, acts as a protective layer over your emotional state.
Okay, so it guards your feelings.
It prevents those relentless accusations of past failures from piercing your core and causing emotional bleeding.
Wow.
Or consider the shield of faith. The text describes faith not as a passive belief, but as a mobile defense designed to extinguish flaming arrows, which the guide interprets as sudden, intrusive thoughts of despair or sudden bursts of temptation.
What strikes me is that the effectiveness of all this armor relies entirely on weapon 3, which might be the most counterintuitive concept in the entire book.
Humility.
Yes, humility. The guide points to a specific order of operations in James chapter 4. The verse says, "Submit yourselves therefore to God. Resist the devil and he will flee from you."
The sequence is vital there.
It really is. Resistance must follow submission. You absolutely cannot resist the enemy's tactics until you have first bowed your own ego. Pride is the bridge the enemy walks across to access your life. Humility burns that bridge to the ground.
And that submission creates the foundation for weapon 6, which the text calls the art of fleeing.
Oh, yes.
The guide uses the narrative of Joseph in the book of Genesis, who physically runs away when he is cornered and tempted by Potiphar's wife. He leaves his cloak behind and sprints out of the house.
I want to linger on that because it is such a massive psychological pivot. When we hear the phrase spiritual warfare, we usually imagine standing our ground, planting our feet, and fighting a heroic battle.
Right, sword in hand.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But the text is saying that sometimes the absolute best, most strategic warfare you can engage in is simply running away from a toxic environment.
Physical retreat is often a profound spiritual victory. The text argues that you do not have to stand and mentally debate a temptation.
Just leave.
Exactly. If you are in a situation where your defenses are weak, the wisest tactical move is to remove yourself from the blast radius. Close the laptop, leave the room, change your commute. Physical action breaks the mental loop of rationalization we discussed earlier.
To make all of these abstract concepts hyper-practical, the text provides a daily checklist for the listener.
It's very actionable.
It is. In the morning, before you check your phone or read the news, you consciously put on that armor, your spiritual PPE. At noon, you do a thought life check. Are you entertaining a lie? Are you letting bitterness toward a coworker take root?
Right.
In the evening, you perform a heart examination. Where did you compromise today? The text urges you to confess those compromises quickly so you don't give the enemy a foothold.
And the Greek word used for foothold is topos, which literally means a place or a territory.
Like real estate.
Yes. In a military context, it is a beachhead. Unresolved anger or hidden compromises provide the enemy with a literal landing pad to launch further deception into your life.
So to prevent those beachheads, the checklist ends with maintaining a posture of worship throughout the day. The text beautifully describes a lifestyle of genuine thanksgiving as the smell of death to the adversary.
Because it constantly reminds him of the divine worship he forever lost when he rebelled.
Exactly. Genuine worship creates an atmosphere of humility and truth that an entity defined by pride and deception fundamentally cannot endure.
It's toxic to him.
Okay, so what does this all mean? When we zoom out and look at this entire guide, from the cosmic origin of the adversary to the granular details of the daily checklist, the ultimate takeaway the text presents is a profound paradox.
Yeah, it really flips the script.
It does. The secret to overcoming this ancient, brilliant, ruthless enemy is not becoming stronger, smarter, and more self-reliant. The secret is becoming smaller in your own eyes and relying entirely on a higher authority.
It all circles back to the theology of victory. The text points to Colossians 2.15, reminding the reader that Christ has already disarmed the spiritual powers and authorities, making a public spectacle of them. This is the core comfort of the entire guide. You are not fighting for victory. If you have submitted to God, you are fighting from a victory that has already been permanently secured.
Wow.
The war is over. Your daily routine is simply enforcing that outcome on the battlefield of your own mind.
You are fighting from victory. As we wrap up this deep dive, we want to leave you with one final thought to mull over, building on everything we've just unpacked.
It's a really important question to ask yourself.
It is. The guide explicitly notes that the devil's greatest weapon against human beings is the urgency of the present moment. His primary goal is to make you believe that today's crisis, today's failure, today's overwhelming anxiety is all there is, blinding you to the bigger picture.
Right, making you forget the eternal reality.
Exactly. If that premise is true, we have to ask, how much of the daily stress, the frantic urgency, and the crushing anxiety you feel right now is actually just a manufactured distraction? A psychological smokescreen specifically designed to make you forget your eternal security.
It really makes you evaluate what you're stressing over.
It does. The next time you feel overwhelmed by the murky, chaotic waters of your own mind, ask yourself who is actually stirring the water. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. Keep questioning the shadows, keep exploring, and stay curious.
Thank you for listening. There is a lot that goes into producing these deep dives, from research, copywriting, to studio production. We hope you enjoy and ask that you give the Deep Dive team a like and subscribe so as not to miss any of this deep dug knowledge.